We're very excited to have Jane Parker today as our speaker. I'm really looking forward to her comments. Kayla, would you like to introduce our speaker?
Thank you, Howard. My name is Kayla Bumba, and I'm from Salinas, and I'm the vice president. And it was my honor to convince Jane to be our speaker today. And you've all read your rotor, I hope, with all the good things that we said about Jane. A little history about Jane. She is a native Monterey County person with the exception of the first 3 months of her life when she lived in Las Vegas. I enjoyed reading her father's byline when I moved to Carmel. He wrote about the education situation in Monterey County. That was in the late 60s or the mid 60s, I think, when I arrived. And isn't it nice that it is National Women's Voter Month? We welcome Jane. She is a league member. We're very proud of that. And she's been the most responsive supervisor I've ever known. And I've lived here. I've lived here almost 50 years. So I would like to get her up here and not waste any more time on me and let Jane share with us everything you've wanted to know about being a supervisor, but we're afraid to ask. And I'm not going to hug her. I'm just going to blow her a kiss. Jane? Break a leg.
Thank you, Kayla. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's really interesting to start looking back on the time that I've spent in the role of county supervisor from District 4. I want to just mention, I brought a few handouts. I know that the League is an educational institution, so, you know. So I brought the org chart for the county, partly because I was fairly aware of county functions when I got elected, but you know, there's always a little something that the county does that you just don't know about. And I didn't realize that the county houses the child support services that really tries to go after absent parents to encourage them to provide financial support to their children. Also these days, mostly we don't think about the fact that the county is houses the Office of Emergency Services. They're very busy these days with the coronavirus, along with the health department and so on, but I wasn't really aware of that. 911 dispatchers, and of course the general public doesn't necessarily know that the county does things from trauma at the safety net hospital to probation to libraries, maybe, you know, paving roads. I mean, it's such an interesting, health and human services, such an interesting variety of services. So it's part of what makes the job so interesting. So I thought, well, an org chart might be of interest to you. And then I also, another aspect of the county services are things like inspecting restaurants. There's others, a handout that I use when I go to speak to students at schools to give them ideas about ways that they've encountered county responsibilities without really knowing it. And it has questions, you know, have you been to a library? Have you eaten in a restaurant lately? That kind of thing, to give sort of a more fun way of thinking about it. And then on the back of that sheet, I always like to encourage people to communicate with me and with the board and to participate and let us know if there are issues that they want worked on. And so when I do go and speak to students, I give them on the back of that other sheet, it has kind of a template for writing a letter to their elected officials, so encouraging them to write to their city council if they live in a city, or to the board of supervisors. And you'll see it's a very simplistic template, but could work. I mean, I think the League sort of follows that kind of template too. Probably using more words than the fourth graders do, but anyway, that's another something that I enjoy. And then I just put out a sheet that has the dates for my hot topics this year. I'm the only supervisor that consistently has opportunities for the public to find me easily, And I know Mary Adams now is doing, she calls them fireside chats, and I think she does them about every 3 or 4 months. So the idea is catching on slowly. I did want to just kind of look back, and as I did, I remembered when I was first running, and we were just hoping against hope that I could get elected. So many progressives, good, thoughtful candidates had run over the years and just hadn't made it, would get, 30% of the vote or something. And it had gotten discouraging for activists and good government folks who really thought that a different perspective was needed. So we, and when I was running, the Board of Supervisors was kind of a good old boys club. It was, the political establishment, the good old boys, with a gal in there too, who would vote the way that the political insiders really wanted folks to vote. And so it sort of felt to those of us who were trying to do good things in the community as though it was a closed door. We were sort of banging on it or beating our heads against the wall. But it was with a lot of hope. I think that a lot of, and ready to be disappointed, that a lot of people supported me. When I first ran in 2004, I got into the runoff, which frankly was not expected by the power brokers. That was sort of delicious to me to find out early on that I called a friend who I had known through my work at Planned Parenthood. She was part of Republicans for Choice, and she had backed me when I ran for the Monterey Peninsula College Board. And so I thought, well, I'm running for county supervisor. I'll just, I need to dial for dollars, so I'll call her and see. So, and I thought, well, she probably won't support me because Jerry Smith was my main opponent, and he had switched from being a Democrat to being a Republican, and she was likely to support the Republican. But I thought, well, I'll let her say no. So I called her up and I said, hi, you may know I'm running. And she said, oh, yes, Jane. Well, let me tell you how it's going to go. Jerry Smith is going to get all of the ag money, and, Darlene Dunham might get a little bit of the ag money, but Jerry's going to win. And I said, what about me? And she said, oh, Jane, you're no threat. And so once my ego bruise got out of the way, I thought, now this is delicious. I have just heard news direct from the mouth of the Republican Central Committee about what they're thinking the prospects are for this race. So I thought, they're not paying any attention to me. So it was really kind of great. So I got into the runoff, and then in November, it was too close to call for about 3.5 weeks, and I ended up losing by less than a percentage point to Jerry Smith. So that was very close. And so thanks to all of you, individually, of course, the League of Women Voters does not endorse candidates, but many of you were very, very supportive and have been over the years. And so in 2004, I came so close. I thought, well, that's a victory in itself. So I definitely have to run again the next time. And unfortunately, Jerry Smith died in office, and the governor, Schwarzenegger, that time, appointed Isla Matee McCutcheon, who had been the mayor of Marina, appointed her to the seat. And I beat her handily in 2008, so that was great. And we were just thrilled. I mean, that was really such a big victory for so many people who for so many years had worked hard to get someone elected who would think about the public interest and the environment in addition to all the other things that the other folks wanted to pay attention to. So I remember that there was a huge crowd at my swearing in 2009, and it was, of course, I don't remember this because I was, it's like when you graduate from high school, you don't hear the people shouting and clapping and carrying on because you're just so like, I've got to get my diploma. So I was focused on, other things, but it was quite a celebration. And we had just, lots and lots and lots of people were there. And it was just such an exciting moment for all of us. Finally, we had a win after all those disappointments. Now, my first term, the first few years were pretty rough in a way. It was all very polite on a certain level, but the political establishment did not want me there. And they were very concerned that, someone like me, and they were already making up very frightening stories about who I was, that I would be in closed session, that I would be getting the inside information, that I would be able to be directing staff, and being part of making decisions. So my colleagues were pretty polite in public. They were pretty polite in other situations. But sometimes we could see below the gloves, and there's definitely a sense that we were being kept at arm's length. It was they didn't want me there. They didn't want my staff. They basically didn't want you there. They didn't want the public's perspective. And so it was hard for us to rely on information that we're being given. We felt that when we found that things were being withheld, they were making it harder for us to participate. So just getting reelected then also felt like a huge deal, because the opposition has always been there in the District 4 race. I never get to run unopposed. And they were really very eager the opposition was very eager to get me unelected. And they were kind of, even the staff at the county, they were kind of waiting me out. They thought maybe it was a one-time thing, and then weren't they surprised when I won a re-election in 2012 by a good margin and an even better one in 2016. But it was that re-election in 2012 where I could just feel the difference. It's like they kind of went, uh-oh, she's here for the long haul. So thank you so much for all your support to not just get me elected one time, but to have that continue. And showing up, supporting the candidate, but then also supporting the issues that you care about, and showing up at the board meetings, writing letters, and that's the kind of thing that really helps. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about a phenomenon I call the power of three, where, having community involvement really gives me something to talk about, and then a way for us to kind of squeeze staff to get things done. Well, one of the things that I had a vague idea about, but the extent of it really surprised me. A county supervisor sits on between 15 and 20 boards, commissions, and committees. So it's not just going to the Tuesday Board of Supervisors meeting. I sit on the Waste Management District, the Transportation Agency for Monterey County, Monterey Bay Air Resources Board, Monterey Bay Community Power, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, one of our favorites, the Central California Alliance for Health, which manages Medi-Cal programs. And really, it's a very diverse and mind-boggling array of topics and policy issues to be prepared to discuss and make decisions about. It's also quite fascinating. So that really brings me to my great appreciation for having staff. A county supervisor has an office administrator and 2 policy aides. And so Christy Markey and Wendy Askew have been my aides for the entire time. And I'll tell you, they are so smart, so capable. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do without their help. It's like having 3 or 4 of me. They're just so effective at what they do, responding to constituents. I mean, it's really amazing. And then my office manager, Lori Chappell, if any of you call the office, she's probably the one that you speak to. She answers calls. She fields the folks who come into the office. She manages my calendar, which has got to be like a Rubik's Cube exercise. And she does a lot of constituent response. At first it was Wendy and Christy who would work with the constituents, but now Lori's been there long enough that she knows the ropes, and she does a great job listening to people patiently and really trying to connect them with who they need to get their problems solved. So let's see, a few highlights. So when I got elected, I really was focused on transparency, accountability, prevention, that early investment to prevent problems from occurring or to make them less serious, and of course the environment. And so transparency and accountability, when I was first elected, you may remember, board agendas were not available online. You could be on a distribution list, and you could maybe get the agenda by email. But if you wanted supporting materials, you either had to go to Salinas to get a paper copy, or maybe if you were lucky, they would fax one to you. But if they were busy, they wouldn't get around to it. So one of the first things I did was ask the clerk to get the board agendas and all the supporting material posted online. And that happened within a few months of my being elected. So that was great. When you get the So now they're online, but then we realized that the law requires a 72-hour posting, which is fine, but what that meant for a Tuesday board meeting was that the agendas were coming out at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and so then if you had questions or I had questions about the agenda, there wasn't anyone around to answer the questions over the weekend, so you really only had Monday, and then sometimes the materials were coming late. I mean, it was just really a scramble and not a good way to do business. So we managed to change the county guidelines to have a 96-hour rule. So now the agendas are posted online Thursday around noon. So you have Thursday and Friday, as well as Monday and the weekend, to look at the agendas. And at least when I'm chair, the department heads know that they can still add an item right up until that Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. But when I'm chair, it's only if it's urgent and arose late and cannot wait until the next week's meeting. I'm very strict about that. Other chairs are not as strict. But in the past, people had the sense that things were being slipped in at the last minute onto the agenda without sufficient materials for you all to be able to figure out what in the world was going on. And of course that was happening, and that's the way they liked it. So that has changed. And in addition, now we have the board committees. Those agendas and supporting materials are also available online, as well as when we have agenda items that are coming that are longer than 50 pages in length. I also asked that they be provided at least 10 days in advance of the board meeting so that we'd have a chance to read them along with everything else. So those are also posted on the website. So for your reading pleasure, there's a lot there. We also initiated performance evaluations for the department heads that report directly to the Board of Supervisors. That hadn't happened before I got there, and now it's just a part of the way we do business, I'm glad to say. And then we also developed performance measures for county departments, which was a big culture change for them, and we made some good progress there, and then funding ran out, and so I think that'll probably devolve a bit until we can renew the focus. But it was a good start. Another early victory was the establishment of the Alternative Energy and Environment Subcommittee. I was appointed to that since it was my idea, and I'm still on it. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you get maneuvered out of things. But so on that committee, we were able to bring forward the styrofoam ban, the plastic bag ban, the municipal climate action plan to reduce the county government's carbon footprint. These things took years, but they did happen. Which, part of my message is that we can change things. It just takes a lot of persistence and a good team. And that, again, I'll talk about with the power of three. The county has just hired a new sustainability manager. I'm meeting with her either later this week or next week, and I'm hoping that she will bring a new level of expertise and energy to really focus on climate change. The county could be playing such a leadership role in this area, and we're not. So I'm hoping we can get a little more energy into that area. Yeah, so this question of change, I feel like I see that on the County Board of Supervisors as well as city councils, the people who are in elected office are not always reflective of community attitudes and concerns. And so it's really important that the community be involved, because the public has to lead and the leaders will follow. So when I got to the Board of Supervisors 12 years ago, I feel like the voters were ready for a change, and they got me elected, and then Mary Adams a little bit of time after that. I have to say, though, I did spend, I think it was 8 years I spent as the only woman on that board? Oh, my goodness. It's better having Mary there. But I feel as though with the kinds of changes that we've been able to work on over the years, the county is not quite as stagnant as it used to be. There is a real shift, and some of it has to do with this greater ability of the public, I think, to be involved and to have a couple of supervisors who are really interested in bringing forward things that are issues that matter to the community, not just what we think is a good idea. So, for instance, having the hot topics meetings, those. Nobody was doing that before, and now it's something that in election years just about everyone does, and Mary now does consistently, and actually Chris Lopez in the 3rd district down the Salinas Valley, he's doing a lot of community outreach and community meetings. So it's something that's now it's a common theme, and the same with the concept of prevention and early investment to keep problems from getting so bad that they are either non-soluble or very, very expensive to solve. Now everyone seems to be talking about that. So, but I do want to talk about this power of 3. So that's just what I've named it. And it's the phenomenon that I've noticed over time, that when community members who care about and are knowledgeable about an issue organize yourselves into small or larger groups and start to speak up. And then when you can find an elected official, and it only takes one, you don't have to have the majority. You just need to have one elected official who gets it and who will say the same things or similar things, and then between you find the staff people who have responsibility for that area to work on, and we basically just start squeezing the staff until sometimes they're willing and they want to work on the issue, and sometimes they're not. So it just changes the amount of squeeze that needs to happen, and it also affects the timeline. So the first time I really noticed this was when Obamacare was coming onto the horizon, there was the opportunity in California to expand the Medicare definition to include people who had slightly higher income levels, and to have them be included and be able to be covered by Medi-Cal. They were falling between the cracks otherwise. It was community members who really wanted this. It was the in-home supportive services workers who realized that with their income levels, they would benefit greatly. So they started meeting with me. We got the head of the hospital and the head of the health department, and I started advocating from the dais. Actually, I had for a while been talking about this, and a lot of nothing was happening, and the community members were finding the same thing. So we kind of got together and started meeting with the staff members, and I'll tell you, those community members met regularly with the relevant health department staff and Natividad Medical Center staff until something happened. It took 18 months, and they got lots of resistance. Oh, it's going to be too expensive. It's too hard. Oh, no, we can't. Oh, it's dangerous, or whatever. All those things came up. And then when they would talk at the Board of Supervisors, it would be, oh, yes, we're working on it. So different messages to different people, and we just kept squeezing, kept meeting, kept moving them along. They would come up with objections. We'd find out that those things were not true, and so then we'd come back. It took a long time. And then, with a lot of fear and trepidation, the county staff said, okay, we're going to do this. And within a couple of months, they were saying what a fabulous thing it was, how well it was working. Anyway, it was the best thing since sliced bread. So, and that was because community members came forward, and we were able to push. So another example of leaders following the community and the power of 3 is the sunset of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. As you know, there was recently momentum to further extend the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and with the help of citizens organizations like the League of Women Voters, we were able to inform the staff in Sacramento and the leadership, elected leadership, about the detriments of continuing that agency. Local residents were really tired of FORA. The lack of transparency, the disrespect for the public, the failure to remove the blighted buildings, and the failure to develop policy guidelines required by the base reuse plan for community design and oak woodland protection. I mean, the list goes on. So people's patience had worn thin. So the community wanted FORA gone, and you made your voices heard. There were many issues that were problematic, but one of the ones that I was particularly motivated by was that FORA has a developer fee that couldn't be changed without a vote of the Fort Ord property owners. And for a while, that was just the developers and not very many people, and then it has become more people. And that fee charged the same amount of money per residential unit, whether you were building a one-bedroom condo or a five-bedroom house. It's about $24,000. So if you're a developer, do the math, you are being given a disincentive to build the smaller units, which are the ones that we as a community need. Those are the ones that are called for in the base reuse plan. If we want to accommodate our workforce and our aging population and have walkable mixed-use communities, we need those affordable by design. But the FORA fee was basically guaranteeing that that wasn't going to happen. For years, I was advocating about this, but I couldn't get FORA staff to cooperate and even bring it to the board to have a conversation. So, you know, FORA was just stuck in the past with all of its old ideas, and it had become a hindrance to progress. And it's a perfect example of how evolution in governmental institutions just doesn't happen fast enough. But persistence paid off. The bill to extend FORA, which seemed like a done deal, a total shoe-in at the beginning, was stopped in committee. So someone was able to get to it. And so in a couple of months, FORA will sunset. So power of three, yeah, you don't need to be part of a majority to have influence. There are some moments where it's more difficult than others. So many times I was on the losing end of a 4-to-1 vote. And that was tough. There's a lot of pressure going into some of those situations to go along, and then a lot of hostility when it looks as though you're not going to do as you're supposed to. And one was the bus maintenance yard that would have taken out like acres and acres of oak trees and oak woodland on Fort Ord. It was being called Whispering Oaks, and if they had proceeded with that project, that's all we would have had left is whispers of oak trees in a sea of concrete. And when I first came in, I was kind of neutral on the project, but it was thanks to people in the community who were raising concerns that I thought, oh, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. So I ended up voting against it, and it was difficult because I'm a big booster of public transportation, and I didn't want to be going against Monterey Salinas Transit. But I also knew that MST had been encouraged to pursue that particular location by the county so that MST would give up the property that they had been given designated through the FORA process and let that parcel be available to Monterey Downs. So MST got pulled into the politics, and I really felt bad for them. But here again, it's the power of three. Community members educated me. I started voicing my concerns. I voted against it, and the community rose up and got a record number of signatures in record time to put a referendum on the ballot. And when the matter came back to the Board of Supervisors, they could either put it on the ballot or they could rescind the vote. And they could not back up fast enough. They were so apologetic that they'd made such a mistake. And so they rescinded the vote. And it was particularly sweet for me because that happened on Valentine's Day. So, yeah, that was fun. Yeah, sometimes those things that are extra difficult, when it does come around and come back and it's okay, it's particularly delicious and sweet. So another contentious one that I was in the midst of was the Regional Water Project. And many of you may remember that one. That was a partnership between Marina Coast Water District, the Monterey County Water Resources Agency, and CalAm to build a desal plant in Marina. And there was just so much pressure. I mean, if you were here, you remember, like, all of the elected officials and all of the business people and everybody was saying, oh, this is so needed, it's so important, it's fabulous, we need it, we've got to do it. But I read through the documents and I was concerned about a number of things. One was there were some costs that were being included in that project that I felt they had nothing to do with that project. So that was going to raise the price unnecessarily. I was concerned about the impacts of taking that water out of the groundwater basin. It was already an overdrafted basin. I was also concerned about the management structure of the folks who were going to be managing the project. It was a little unwieldy. And then the terms of the agreement that had the desal plant being turned over to CalAm once we had paid for it. So we would no longer have control. So the whole thing, though, fell apart over conflicts of interest, and there are still lawsuits going on about it that haven't been resolved. And I think it did come back to our board for a vote, and we voted to withdraw, or it may be that all the agreements were just moot because of the conflicts of interest. I don't remember, but it did all fall apart. I think I should probably wind up here so that we can have time for your questions. I do want to say that one of the things that I have so loved about this job is, of course, the complexity, the ability to work on issues that really matter to the community. I mean, I haven't even gotten into public safety, and there are just gazillions of things. But I have just so appreciated, even in those very, very difficult times when I was getting the stink eye from my colleagues and a lot of people in the community support from people in my district and people throughout the county has been so fantastic. It really has helped buoy my spirits. It's, obviously when I was sworn in, that was an exciting moment, but how many times have I been in the grocery store or out on a hike when someone who I may recognize or I may not, will stop me and just say, "You're Jane Parker. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. You're my supervisor," whether I am or not. But of course, but what they're saying is that I'm the supervisor that they really feel represents them. And that is so gratifying because that's why I am there. I think that by being there, by staying true to my principles, by maintaining a certain amount of equanimity, at least in public, I provide a kind of hope to people that it is possible to have good policy and to have good people be in elected office and do good work, without melting down or spiraling out of control. And I think hope is a commodity that is as precious as the air and the water that we fight to keep clean, or food on the table, or a good education. It's absolutely vital to life. There's another fun memory where I really appreciated community support. When Supervisor Alejo became chair in 2018, and many of you probably remember this, he exercised his prerogative to propose committee assignments for the board to ratify. And he proposed removing Supervisor Adams and myself from a couple of key seats where we belonged because of our constituency and so on, and inserting himself. So he was only removing the women. and putting himself in those seats. And as you can imagine, when the word went out to the community, there was a hubbub. Yes, I see some good show of support there in the back. There was a big response. There were letters, there were phone calls, social media posts. People showed up at the Board of Supervisors, and it really made a difference. And it was so gratifying because that was such a dirty move. And so it changed the outcome also. So we didn't get everything that we wanted that day, but some of it. And it really wouldn't have happened unless people had really activated. So thank you. I also want to say before I close that I really encourage women to run for office. We need more women. The research shows until you have 30% women or more on a decision-making body, you're not getting your best decisions. Women tend to listen, to collaborate, to problem solve, and think about the future. Men can do it too, but if there aren't enough women there to help them remember that they can, that male-dominated environment can get very competitive, very zero-sum game, and the whole reason that people are there gets lost. And so I think it's really important. And of course, just gender diversity in all its expressions should be reflected in our government leaders. Politics is still male-dominated, and women, whether straight or gay and transgender people, really experience hostility, and sometimes it's overt and sometimes it's covert, but it's there. And so we need to support each other through those stressful times. And I also think we need to support each other, and we need to prioritize self-care. I have needed to take care of myself, my physical, my mental, my spiritual, emotional health. It's hard sometimes because no one can do it for me. I have to figure out what I need. I need to prioritize time for that, and I have to make it happen. And it's so easy to just say, oh, I'll do it later, and then it never happens. So holding fast to the time that's needed. So I do hikes and yoga, and then I do personal retreats 3 or 4 times a year, just to make sure that I'm not letting the dominant, mean-spirited culture throw me off balance. Yeah, I just want to thank you again for all of your support for on the campaigns, just the moral support, being involved, and really being so thoughtful and informed on the issues, that the kind of involvement that the League of Women Voters in particular, but community activists of all stripes, individual or with groups, what you provide really helps me bring the public's voice to the Board of Supervisors. And, frankly, the county staff work for the public. And it's easy for us to forget that and just do what's convenient for us. So it's helpful to continually have the community's voice reminding us, yoo-hoo. So thank you.
Jane, you have been one of the few supervisors I've observed who actually reads the packets. And your attention to detail has been extraordinary on the Air District Board and at the Board of Supervisors. I was recently interviewed by the firm that has been hired to evaluate the Planning Department and Resource Management Agency. And I began by reading the introduction to the 2005 grand jury report, which had evaluated the Planning Department. Needless to say, it was not very complimentary of the department. It was quite insightful and extraordinary, pointed out extraordinary problems. And my comment was, in 15 years, nothing has really changed. Would you try to surmise of ways that department may move forward and become more responsive?
Thank you. Yes, the planning department has, planning and building, that whole arena, has been a problem since before I was on the Board of Supervisors, and it has been a real conundrum. I have been trying to change the culture in that department. Now, being a county supervisor, I'm not a direct supervisor of anybody in the organization except, and it's the CAO who has to go do that. We had a CAO for a long time whose management style was not particularly hands-on. That has its advantages, but in the situation we were in the Resource Management Agency and the Planning Department, it allowed bad practices to continue. So I think there are a few factors that play in. One is that I think is the responsibility of the Board of Supervisors is I've heard from people when I go to regional or statewide meetings that the County of Monterey has a reputation among the planning community as a place that good planners don't want to work, because you come in and you try to do good planning, and then the not so much the Planning Commission now, but the Board of Supervisors will reverse you and do bad things, and it gets discouraging. So the one thing is that I think the Board of Supervisors needs an education about what good planning is. Now, for political reasons or philosophical reasons, there may be supervisors who don't want to follow that, but I think we need to acknowledge as the board that we play a role in the fact that we can't keep good planners, and so that's just an overarching problem that we've had for a long time. Then when you can't get good planners, then you get people who maybe aren't even planners who are working in the department, or you get people who they figure, oh, well, the Board of Supervisors is going to go with bad policy or bad decisions anyway, so I'll just help the developers get around the rules. And so then that's been going on, where people become expert in maximizing the flexibility, and so architects, developers, anybody involved in the process, they don't actually know what the rules are because they could change at any time. So anyway, it goes from bad to worse. So I think now what I'm hoping is that we've done an assessment of the planning department before and nothing much changed. And so we're trying again. And I really think that we need to find a way to support good planning in the planning department at the very least. And I don't know if that'll be possible, but it's helpful to have community folks involved, because it's when you come to the Board of Supervisors and talk about the things that make sense from a planning or environmental or process perspective, sometimes that's the way we supervisors hear that things are not right. I mean, it was through community members that I heard about a report being changed to say the opposite of what it had originally said. It was originally consistent with, it was a good planner who had made the report be consistent with the local land use plan, and they were told by their supervisor inside the department to that was not okay, and so then they had to change it, and they left because they can't work under those conditions. So those are the kinds of things that are going on that we need to find a way to stop. And it takes everybody's eyes and ears and on the department and the voices to be heard. So hope we can change it.
Thank you so much for all your wonderful service, Jane. My concern is about the representation of the people in the county on the Board of Supervisors. It seems to me it's rather out of balance. How is it chosen? How are the boundaries set? Mm-hmm. Because some areas have very few people in them and others have very many people in them, mm-hmm. and yet they don't have the representation.
Right, so that's a good question and very timely, because this year is the census going on, and once the census is complete, there will be a redrawing of the district lines if needed. Basically, the districts are supposed to be approximately equal in population. So in District 1, you have a very small area to get to your 80 or 85,000 people. In District 3, which runs down, District 1 is in the city of Salinas, and District 3, running down the Salinas Valley, you need to go all the way down the valley and have multiple cities and a bunch of people living in rural areas to get to 80 to 85,000 people. So, and once the lines are drawn, there is an attempt to not have the lines gyrate or change too much. Now, we did have a big change when Fort Ord closed, and so District 4, where I am, needed to expand over into Salinas because we had lost population. So we had to go, that changed the boundary quite a bit. And now it may move back again to the west because we now have more population in Marina and East Garrison. So we'll see. It'll be a very interesting set of line drawing this time. But it's weird. You don't necessarily see it, but the idea is for the population to be equivalent. Now, what that doesn't do is make the number of voters equivalent. So in a district where people are older, if you have your 80,000 residents, you may have 60,000 voters. In a district where your age is, you have more families with kids, and you have, a lot of your population is ages, 5 to 18, you have fewer voters. So, but the way that the lines are drawn, it has to do with just population, not the age.
Can we have more than 5 supervisors?
I don't know if we could have more than 5 supervisors. If we did, I think 7 is a number that I see in other areas, and I don't know what the criteria are to make that change.
You have to change it.
You have to change the charter? Okay, yeah, it would be a big deal. You could do it.
First of all, thank you for your years of public service. I have 2 questions. First of all, what are the 3 most pressing problems that you see for Monterey County? And do you think there's any chance that the sheriff will become appointed instead of elected?
So let's see, 3 most pressing issues, what coronavirus aside. I think water is definitely something that has always been an issue, and it's an issue that more of us know about now. I think always the management and protection of open spaces, and there's a lot more interest being verbalized about making open spaces available to more people, and that's good. Also, though, open spaces need protection from people, so balancing that. And on Fort Ord, we have the opportunity to, I think we have enough space to make all that happen. But it's that whole question of our natural resources. I guess I would just make it natural resources, not just open spaces, because the threats to the area because of increased oil drilling, but we just need to be much more proactive, I think, in our awareness and our activities related to the health and nurturing of ecosystems. We tend to think, a tree here and a pond there, but they can't survive just one by one. So I think really thinking about that natural infrastructure. And then the third issue, I guess, that I've been focusing on and that I think is a real leverage point for our county is focusing on early childhood development. It's one of the ultimate early intervention, early investments that we can do when kids get the kind of bonding and stimulation that they need at those very young ages, 0 to 3. They are prepared for school emotionally, mentally, and they have the social skills and the ability to develop them further that they need to be successful in life. And so many of the issues and the problems that the county is responsible to take care of when they crop up, whether it's from law enforcement, truancy, any kind of problematic behavior, just about, it can be lessened or avoided if kids are getting that kind of attention in their early. If you need a creative workforce, you need to start at prenatal and to age 3. And beyond that, you're swimming upstream. So I think that's one that is urgent and is one that we can make more investments in the county. And then the sheriff, it'll be interesting. There's more discussion about the sheriff being appointed than there used to be. There are challenges when the sheriff is elected, where it's harder for the Board of Supervisors and the public to have any kind of oversight over the budget, really. So it's a topic that comes up. It's short of that would be more, there have been people who are calling for audits of the sheriff's department. There are ways that the Board of Supervisors could earmark the funds in the budget or have them be provided on a reimbursement basis to make sure that they're spent the way that we might want them to be. But it's very much against the culture of how things have been done for a long time. So it'll take a while. But if people want to work on that, I think there's more interest at the, and I don't even know exactly what the process would be, but it's probably it would be worth exploring and to see if there's broader community interest and interest on the Board of Supervisors if we have to make that decision to, there are pluses and minuses.
I thank you, as always, Jane, for everything that you've been doing, even before you were a supervisor.
Thank you.
It's been very important work as a specialist in early childhood health and safety, as well as prenatal and maternal. I am very concerned about the issues in Monterey County, particularly emphasizing the agricultural workers and the people exposed to chemicals. Speaking before the Board of Supervisors is a challenge in sort of self-control. Instead of saying, hey, you guys, I'm standing here talking to you, you are looking at the speaker, no matter who's speaking. You might look down occasionally, but you're looking at the speaker. That is such a positive thing. Somebody's listening.
Mm. Yes, it can be very intimidating as a member of the public to come and speak. I mean, there the supervisors are up on the dais, up above, looking down, and it's you have to speak into the microphone, and there's an audience, and you're being videotaped. I mean, it's a fairly intimidating experience. So I really appreciate it that people do show up and speak truth to power. You've been very active in the work to try to keep pesticides away from where people live, and kids are going to school and so on. And you would think that would just be such a no-brainer. And I think it's getting more attention and traction because you are bringing it up, and then now when these episodes happen where people are sprayed accidentally or they're not getting notification, this is starting to be not okay, whereas before it was just, oh well, cost of doing business. So it's a slow process, and when we persist, we can change the minds. We also need to change the bodies of who are sitting on that Board of Supervisors. And so I work on that as well.
How can organizations become effective lobbyists of the Board of Supervisors? And what methods of communications do the supervisors seem to respond to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what I've seen is that it's helpful, it's sort of on the persistence theme, it's helpful to come maybe at general public comment to bring up an issue, to raise awareness about it, and do that maybe a few times if you have the time. It's then, if you have a proposal or a plan or a set of issues that you want to raise, it's very good to meet with each supervisor individually to educate them, because as you can imagine, we're pulled in many directions, and if we just get a board report a few days in advance of the meeting, if we read it, we're reading a multitude of other things at the same time. So if we have had a meeting, even just a 30-minute meeting to go more in depth on what the issues are and the proposed solutions, that really helps a lot. Then when I'm reading the board report, I have all that information in my awareness already. The other advantage of doing that is you get an idea of how favorably the supervisor is hearing and viewing what you're talking about. So you already will have a sense for whether you have some openness or a majority. You can't go from supervisor to supervisor and say, well, so-and-so said they would vote for it. If, you can't do that. This is a violation of the Brown Act. But you can meet with each supervisor and you can get your own read on where you think they are. You can ask them, when this comes before you, or if this were to come before you, would you be supportive of this kind of thing? And they can tell you or not. But they're likely to say, yes, I would support something like that. And then the third thing is to find the mechanism to get that item on the agenda or before the full board for a decision. Often that means, so here's something else that I didn't realize when I got elected. Individual supervisors cannot put items on the agenda. So you would have to find a way to work through staff, or we can help you find a way to work through staff to put something on the agenda. The closest that we can get to putting something on the agenda is to do something called a referral, that essentially is a request for the staff to look into something and to report back about what kind of resources it might take to delve into that further.
Hello, Jen.
Yes.
I want to thank you. You have been a champion for women to be on the podium. Anyway, I do have a question. FORA is going away. What is the role of the county in this after effect?
Yes, when FORA sunsets, the jurisdictions that have land on Fort Ord will make their own decisions about how they're going to develop. One of the useful things about FORA was that when decisions were being made by cities and the county, it would all sort of run through FORA at one time or another, and so you really only you could just go to FORA and find out what was going on. Now, if you're curious about these things, you'll get to be paying closer attention to Seaside, Marina, the county. So pretty much it'll be the jurisdictions who will be making those decisions. The county has a few roles that are span or that are more generalized. One is that we will continue to collect property tax and distribute it to the entities where it's supposed to go. We've been asked to take on storage of records for FORA. But the county doesn't have much of a role going forward other than the role that we already have in terms of some of the land to be developed. Most of the land, so the big development that the county has done is East Garrison. Most of the other lands that were transferred to the county are, through our long-range property management plan, have been put into open space and recreation. So there's no development foreseen there. The other thing is that the county has the largest habitat management responsibility of all the other jurisdictions, so we will have that ongoing responsibility. And one of the things we're working on now is how to distribute the $17 million that FORA has collected in that $24,000 fee for your condo or your 5-bedroom house. 1/3 of that has been put aside for habitat management, and that has added up to $17 million over the years. And we want to make sure that the county gets a significant chunk of that, since we have the most significant chunk of habitat management. Thank you.
Jane Parker,
Are you the hook?
I'm the hook.
All right. They're looking better all the time.
You've had a wonderful 12-year run, and it's been a very successful one, and your constituents appreciate it. Thank you.